So most people think of Korea as the poster child of ethnic nationalism. But what exactly is ethnic nationalism? How do people feel it, learn it, perpetuate it? And that work is done by what I call national stories. So these national stories are the folklore of the national people. These are oral narratives that have been passed down through generations about what happened to the nation, who stood by us versus against us, and how we as a national people persevered. They are relationship stories. And ethnicity, in particular, the reimagination of the Korean nation as a singular bloodline or a 단일 민족 in the early 20th century, was an incredibly powerful frame that shaped and constrained these national stories to have a unifying property, both horizontally across South Koreans, but also vertically, tying the South Korean people and the state as if one body. Now, that intrinsic connection generated deep moral obligations to the South Korean state in the name of the Korean nation. And it's why ethnic nationalism has been, really surprisingly, a positive force for South Korea's democracy. And we've seen this in the impressive displays of civic duty in South Korea, from the national gold drives during the Asian financial crisis back in 1997 to more recently the high levels of compliance with South Korea's COVID restrictions. But the next big challenge for South Korea, its demographic crisis, poses a problem for this ethnic national story. Declining fertility all but necessitates immigration of foreign wives and labor. And that directly challenges this foundational element in Korea's national story. In fact, holding on to an ethnically homogeneous national story in the face of such obvious demographic change can actually backfire, serving as a source of disconnect for certain new groups of citizens and the South Korean state. So the democratic benefits of the ethnic national story have really run its course in South Korea. Now, the obvious answer here might seem like a shift towards multiculturalism, but it's really not that simple. The democratic value of national stories lies not in what it's based on, whether it's ethnicity, multicultural values, or something else, but how it uses that element to weave a mutually committed relationship between citizens and the state. So the most important thing from a national story and democracy standpoint, as South Korea deals with the growing pains of its demographic crisis, is preventing national fragmentation and the emergence of oppositional national stories. So these are stories that paint the state as excluding or threatening the welfare of what I regard to be my national people. So how does it actually do that? Well, the good news here is that the state, as one half of the nation-state relationship, can do a lot to shape the trajectory of national stories. Inclusionary policies towards immigrants need to be dovetailed with equally constructive experiences for Native Koreans, of whom nearly survey data suggests that 40% still identify with an ethnic narrative. Specific examples would be community programs that are focused on building bridging, not only bonding social capital across foreign and local wives, as opposed to kind of more one-sided cultural training centers that essentially demand foreigners to assimilate. National youth programs where children from multicultural families, as well as ethnically Korean families, can build relationships in the context of service to the state is another example. And entertainment is also an incredibly important tool. So supporting programs that showcase personal stories from immigrants in ways that draw connections to the Korean national stories can help expand people's boundaries of the national us versus them. So it's not just wishful thinking or some kind of abstract call for cosmopolitan enlightenment. These kinds of careful and deliberate public policies are the building blocks for South Korea's necessary evolution towards a more inclusive national story, and ultimately a strong democratic future amidst this growing demographic diversity.